So you're now recording. And I also have a little preamble that I have to read since we're meeting remotely. As permitted by the Governor's Disaster Declaration of December 11th, 2020, the determination has been made that an in-person meeting is not practical or prudent for this committee. To ensure that the meeting is as transparent as possible, we will post the meeting materials approximately 1 week in advance, which we did, and we always do, and provide a recording of this meeting linked on our website, and we will take all votes by roll call. The only vote we actually have to take today will be the approval of the minutes, and that one will need to be by roll call of the committee members. So with that, we will get started. I'm going to skip the call to order in introductions since everybody can see who's here, and we'll introduce ourselves or talk as needed throughout the meeting. Item 2 is agenda changes and announcements. We do have one agenda change. The Lakeshore Drive presentation is not going to happen. The consultants reached out to me and they would like more time. They want to discuss their options with IDOT and FHWA before coming to the committee, and we will go into that in a little more detail when we get to that agenda item. That is the only change I'm aware of. Are there any other changes that anybody else would like to make? Okay, hearing none. All right. Next is going to be the approval of the minutes, and the minutes were distributed. They were posted on our website. What I would ask is for approval of the minutes as presented from the last meeting, June 17th, 2020. And if you could please state your name for who's motioning it and who's seconding it, that would be appreciated.
I'll motion to approve. Mark Pitstick, RTA.
Thank you.
Michael Leslie, second.
Okay. And as I said, we will need to take a roll call. So when I call your name, please state your vote. Chris Schmidt. Chris, are you in favor of the meeting minutes or not? He's unmuted. We can get back to Chris. John Donovan.
Aye, they were excellent meeting minutes.
Yes. Matt Fuller. I don't think he's on the call, is he? Actually, I don't think I see Matt. No. Michael Leslie.
Yes.
Tony Greep.
Yes.
Mr. Pitstick.
Yes.
Mr. Alsemeyer. Buzz, can you unmute?
Oh, I was. I guess you didn't catch it. Yes.
Yes, okay. And David's not here. We can go back to Chris. Chris, if you want to unmute, are you still here with us? I'm looking. It looks like Chris maybe dropped off. Okay. Well, it passes by everybody who was in attendance. So thank you with that. Okay. Moving forward, the next item on the agenda is the semi-annual Onto 2050 conformity analysis. This is the regular memo that we normally put out. I can share my screen if people want to, so you can see the memo. One thing that is unique about the memo this time is that we added at the end, and I will attempt to share my screen on this. We did add information about greenhouse gases. So I know we discussed that before. We did discuss this before at a previous meeting that we would be doing more with greenhouse gases. So for informational only item, we still have PM 2.5 on the memo, and now we've added greenhouse gas mobile sources. When we run moves, we get the same information for greenhouse gases and everything else. It's all included. So we do it for ozone, we do it for PM, and we've always included greenhouse gas. However, we have not made that information public, and now we are doing that. In terms of the reduction goal, that is just kind of a guesstimate right now. CMAP is in the process over the next year or two of hopefully developing targets, and mobile source would be one of the targets areas that we would want to develop actual targets for. This is some back of the envelope stuff just to provide some context for the greenhouse gases that we were displaying from the moves outputs. So as you can see, what we basically did was we took the 2020 greenhouse gas emissions as they were produced for onto 2050, the start of that. And then we know what the percentage reduction is supposed to be each year, which is about 1.33%, going all the way back from 2005. So we reduced greenhouse gas emissions, which is what the goal is, by 1.33% between 2020 and 2050 for each year. So the 2050 GHG reduction goal is really just a linear reduction from where we were at the start of on to 2050. So just to kind of get to where we would want to be, you could see that there needs to be significant efforts made for even kind of the goal as it exists now. I would anticipate that we might need to make more efforts once a real goal is developed. We did not receive any comments on the memo itself. It was released for a 30-day public comment period. It has been forwarded and recommended for approval to the CMAP board and the MPO policy committee in June. And as I said, we did not receive any public comments. We are, as is normal, our analysis shows that we do conform to our motor vehicle emissions budget. You can see now that we actually have a little bit of room. We used to be closer to 59 for our VOCs, and now we're down to about 53.35. So some of the improvements that we have in our system are starting to come online, and we're starting to reflect that and see that. So are there any questions related to that?
Russell, I'm sorry, I didn't catch. How did you determine to do the 1.33% per year for the greenhouse gases?
There had been some work done prior by, I think it was Council Mayors or CMAP or somebody a couple years ago. And starting from 2005 to 2050, there was supposed to be a 60% reduction in on-road mobile sources for GHG. And so we just took a linear reduction from that, and it averages out to 1.33% per year. So I think it winds up being close to a 40% reduction from 2020 to 2050.
Okay.
So like I said, it's just to provide a little bit of context. It's not an actual goal. Nobody voted on it. It's not been adopted by the region or anything. It's just to try to give some sense to the greenhouse gas numbers since it's the first time we've put them out there.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. Are there any other questions related to the conformity memo? Okay, seeing none, I will move on. Item 5, we're cruising right along here. Item 5, I'm hoping Mr. Leslie will be able to jump in, but as you know, Moves 3 was released by the US EPA just before Thanksgiving. I've taken a look at it. I've tried to run it. I can't run it for a variety of reasons. It's a big update, so it's going to take us at CMAP a while to adjust, probably the greater part of a year from when it gets published in the Federal Register. One of the big differences for us is that the custom domain feature is no longer part of Moves 3. That is how we actually run Moves, is through the custom domain, because we run the region. We do the inspection maintenance area and the non-inspection maintenance area. And so that's how we've always run it. So it makes it a little bit easier to run it as a regional conformity model. Going forward, the only option is the county level. And I believe that's what Illinois EPA has been doing. So we'll be more in line with what Illinois EPA does. But that being said, is a lot of our inputs into the current model are at the regional level, and we don't have it disaggregated to the county level. So we'll have to go through a process of creating inputs at the county level and see how that works for us. So we have not started that process. And Michael, I don't know if you wanted to comment on when this might be published in the Federal Register or any other things you have related to three.
Yeah, I mean, I think the takeaways, I don't know about the Federal Register just because everything seems to be backed up, especially between COVID and then the transition. We've heard that Federal Register could be backed up a long time, several weeks. So, but I think the takeaway is there's a 2-year grace period for use, and that should be people some time to transition. And if we need to update SIPs, that we can fit that in that time.
So I think for CMAP, we're gonna probably take at least a year before we transition, which means our next conformity and possibly the one after that, which would be this time next year, we'll be still using Moves 2014A. I don't know, the Buzz, do you guys have any comment on your plans for transitioning to Moves 3? And we're still waiting for Buzz. And let me see, who else do we have? So Buzz, I believe you're still muted. So if you're trying to say something. All right.
I mean, I think one additional thing, Russell, is that as IPA and other states are moving forward with new SIPs, they're going to have to, if they haven't already gone down the path of the mobile source inventory, they're going to have to start incorporating Moves 3 in those levels.
Okay, this is Buzz again here. My computer crapped out. Of course, I'm at work, so that's why if there's a problem. If I be at home, no issue. Haven't really talked anything about Moves 3. Again, I'm just one at the state who runs it by when somebody gives me inputs, and we haven't even begun to have a talk about the new. I'll say the new guy. He's been with Moves for about a year. I haven't known his progress or anything. That's a completely separate group. So, but every time I see something with Moves, I send them an email on that. So something we haven't even really begun to discuss too much on moving to Moves 3. Most likely it will be that guy, and Russell, I'll give you his contact name here when I get offline. I also wanted to make one comment that jogged my memory when you said the regional way to run Moves. Again, I'm going back from memory. I don't remember this exactly, but what I want to say is that when you run it at the regional, is it the regional or what level did you say that was?
We run it in custom domain.
Okay, when you run the domain as compared to county, I think the domain run is a lot faster than a county run.
It takes us 4.5 hours roughly to do a run.
Okay, and yeah, that's where I'm getting at least about that same amount of time per county.
Yeah, so if that's true, and we have to run every county and glue them together, that's I don't know, Michael. We'd have to figure that out too. I don't know how you do that for. So Buzz, if I'm not mistaken, you guys do the non-inspection maintenance area by just taking a 10% reduction, correct?
No, we've got some numbers of what percentage are I&M and what are not, and we run each county twice, once for I&M vehicles and once for non-I&M.
Oh, you do run it twice. Okay, I was mistaken.
Yes,
I thought you did a percentage reduction from IM. So that would, in our area, that's, I don't know, how do you do Grundy? Is that its own county then? Because it's only 2 townships for us. Same thing with Kendall. Is that the entire county then?
Yeah. The way I do it is I will run, I'll run the whole county for I&M, run the county for no I&M. And then we've been just using the population based of what the population is based in that county, and then just taking that percentage of the county emissions and associating it with that.
Okay. So maybe that's something we'll have to figure out how to do it similarly to how you guys do it then.
Right. Yeah. I mean, you guys may have better VMT information in that area, so that might be a better way to split it.
Okay. But so essentially, we're going to be running it at least 6 times, maybe 8, and then another, however many have the non-IM area, 1, 2, 3, 4, probably 4, 5, 6. So we could be running it 14 times instead of just the 2 that we do for each scenario year. Am I hearing that correctly?
Most likely. Now, one thing now, not knowing how you would, I mean, one thing to keep in mind when you are setting this up to head to moves 3 and doing the county level, I mean, if you're going to be using the exact same type of inputs for 2 or more counties, there's nothing in the moves world that says you can't add the VMT and the vehicle population together and run the 2 counties together.
Just as it's like a big county, you know.
Yeah, it's like a big county, but you know, if you're, because your guys are looking more, yeah, just for the region. I have to run separately because I have to keep track of the counties.
Well, I was thinking that, but you know, when I look in moves 3 and you go to select your geography, it only lets you select one county. So then I guess what we're saying is we'd have to know what the defaults are that selecting that one county brings to the table.
Right.
And see if that matters if you have, let's say, all the VMT and all the average speed for Cook and DuPage combined, because there's no
Right.
non-inspection maintenance area there or lake.
Right.
So we could theoretically, maybe you're thinking, run 3 counties, Lake, DuPage, Cook, who all don't have a non-IM area as one, maybe.
Yeah, sounds awesome.
Yeah.
Okay. So that would certainly help.
Yeah. Again, that's with, of course, the caveats that the speed distributions, age distributions, all those good things are all the same for each county.
So we'd probably have to do once as a test each county individually and then compare it to doing it kind of grouped by similar counties and see what the difference is.
Right.
Okay. In Mark, I think it was Mark is, I don't think he's on the phone. Mark Jansen. Do you guys, is that, you guys run it
I'm here.
different though, right? You guys run the area,
Yeah.
3 areas?
Yeah, I think we just have 3 areas. Each county is its own group, and that's based on the national configuration where we're building emission rates with lots of very, specific temperatures and these massive emission factor tables that then we use to calculate our specific emissions, because that's the difference we have, is we have to have that 95-degree day. We have to know what those VOCs are. So we run it there, and we've already been talking with EPA about what are the changes that are happening to the tools we use, smoke and moves. And they say that they've got it running now in that environment. The trick for us is that, those national runs that EPA has nicely run for us so far take 32,000 CPU hours, so they can only run it on the Amazon cloud. And they're talking about the new runs for those national runs are down to about 8,000 hours. So I guess that's good. But even if we wanted to run it for just the single county, they talk about that's a 48-hour run to build the 5 gigabyte emission factor table for a single county. Yeah, it's pretty bad. And I think one of the things we're seeing in a bunch of Northeast and Southeast states is that they're moving back to running moves for every hour of every day of the year. So you basically have a daily temperature file for the county, and then run it for every hour of every day of the year. And that is faster than trying to run it in this emission factor mode that EPA uses, where it literally takes 8,000 hours to run. So I think we're going to be testing over the next year, are there better ways to run moves for photochemical modeling where we can get hourly temperatures and activity, but we don't have to invest in this. I mean, the runs used to take like $5,000 to run on the Amazon cloud. I mean, it was a really expensive and extensive process. So we're hoping to try to avoid as much of that as we can.
Okay. And then Buzz, I believe you guys do run it in inventory mode, right? You're not running it in rates mode.
Right. Yeah. Just inventory.
Because the guidance says that basically whatever you guys are doing, we should mimic that. So inventory mode would still be what we would do. We do produce a rates mode file that we use for other things, non-transportation conformity wise. We use it for CMAC and some other stuff that we might discuss a little bit later. But I guess but that sounds like a lot more time on CMAP's end to do conformity now. I hope the results are worth it. You want to comment on that, Mr. EPA?
Hey, here's a weird question. Has anybody looked into automating any of this?
I mean, maybe we'll be able to do that over time, but not yet. I mean, the model just came out, so I didn't see a thing about batch mode yet, but there is something with the run spec. You know, it's a different setup. First of all, we have to create different inputs. So we'll have to see. I thought there was a way to do that, potentially.
Yeah, the way we do it is that run spec generator and, have all those run specs that, you're basically editing ASCII text files and then pointing moves at this pile of run specs to run.
So hopefully
Yeah,
this
it's real fun.
moves. I'm sorry, go ahead.
What's real fun when you have to do that for 102 counties, like I used to. Yeah.
Yeah, I can imagine. So I guess we'll have to see. And Michael, you don't think that the register notice will come out until what, maybe February?
I mean, that's a safe bet. I would think sometime after the 20th of January.
Okay. Any other questions on moves 3? Otherwise, I'll move on. I'll keep looking for guidance. I did listen in on a webinar that they had. They did say that some of the emissions might go down based on having some stuff updated, but other ones might not if it's in an urban area. So we'll have to also do some testing to see if the emissions change just because the model changed. So I don't think nobody here has probably used it yet, I'm assuming, correct? Hearing none. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I've just run an example to see if it ran. So that's about it.
It did seem to install pretty smoothly, so I'll take that as an improvement just from the prior version. And it doesn't use my SQL anymore, so there's that. I don't know what this Maria database is. I'm not familiar with that. All right. Let's see. Moving on. The next item was supposed to be the North Lakeshore Drive air quality modeling presentation. So CMAP staff met with the consultants for the North Lakeshore Drive project. That is a project in which they're looking to reconstruct and reconfigure potentially North Lakeshore Drive, basically from downtown to the north end where it ends, its terminus. What they had received some comments related to greenhouse gases. And so they were looking to do some sort of air quality analysis specifically related to greenhouse gases. Now, right now, there is no requirement to do greenhouse gas emissions analysis. There's no best practice. There's no industry standard that I'm aware of. So we did meet with them, and Claire, I think it was Claire, me, and Craig, and we encouraged them to use our emissions rates table that we have already generated. And it appeared that that's what they were going to go down rather than doing some sort of full moves run, which probably wouldn't show for any one project at the regional level any change in emissions or very, very little. So that was kind of the genesis of what this presentation was going to be. They wanted to talk about their approach and that they talked to us and that this was going to be, what we were looking for is the committee to give them input on the approach that they were doing, kind of give it without an actual formal vote, kind of if there were objections to what they were doing, voice those. If we were okay with it, kind of say that, and kind of give them almost a consensus, so to speak. Like I said, not a vote, but yeah, you're heading in the right direction. It seems reasonable what you're doing. Your approach doesn't raise any red flags, that kind of stuff. And what I'm hearing from large projects that are out there, is that there's more of a desire to try to show greenhouse gas emissions as part of their NEPA process. And since we don't have a specific process to do that with for them to follow, they're looking for kind of some sort of guidance. And I think we as an agency, CMAP, and this committee in particular, are in a position where we can provide some consistency to what folks do to look at greenhouse gases. So that's kind of where that's at. I think that this topic will come back. There really is no committee other than this one that kind of looks at emissions. So while it's not an official endorsement of any one kind of way to do stuff, I think that if this committee hears from different projects about their approach and is okay with it, that's probably good enough. John, I don't know if you want to weigh in here. It's the NEPA process that we're somewhat referring to. But that's kind of where that presentation was going.
Yeah, I might defer a little bit to Matt Fuller. It looks like he's on, but I haven't heard him. So that seems like a reasonable approach. But Matt's kind of our NEPA primary contact. So if he's not on, let me coordinate with him.
Yeah, Matt is on. I did talk to Matt. So Matt, do you want to weigh in here?
Hey, John. Hey, Russell. Yeah, that seems like a pretty good approach. For a number of years, we haven't really had greenhouse gas analysis on our projects. It's usually reserved for the larger projects, but I think it would be helpful to have input from this group if we do it on projects moving forward. So I think it's a good idea to have that group present what they plan to do and get some feedback from you all.
All right, excellent. So just so folks know, that's for whatever reason, greenhouse gases is the hot topic out there right now, and that's probably likely to continue for the foreseeable future. And we'll even be having a greenhouse gas presentation near the end of today's meeting. All right. So unless there's any more questions on item 6, we're going to move to item 7. Okay, I don't see anybody unmuting themselves, so that's good. All right. I'm hoping that for item 7, the 2008 ozone NAAQS non-attainment reclassification status updates, that we can hear from Illinois EPA and US EPA as to the status of the redesignation request to attainment and where that might be.
Hey, Russell, I think there's sort of two things going on here. We have the redesignation right now is not going anywhere for the moderate classification. So the area is serious, but on a separate track, IEPA working with LADCO is looking at exceptional events for, I think it's 2018. Correct me if I'm wrong. No, or is it this summer? I don't know. I'm not really keeping that close, but Illinois is exploring the possibility of losing some of the data due to smoke in the west and impact on ozone. So if that exceptional event demonstration is approved by EPA, then we could move forward with the moderate redesignation. If that doesn't go through, then IEPA is going to have to come in with a serious RFP and attainment demonstration, which would set up new budgets. So it's kind of in the next month or two, we'll probably know what direction IEPA needs to go as far as the 2008 standard.
Okay. So Buzz, is that kind of how you guys see it too?
Pretty much there. I'm a little bit out of the loop on the exceptional events thing. That's more David Bloomberg dealing with that or whatever. So I guess him and whoever else is more optimistic on that, but I have that's out of my hands on all that. So yeah, just waiting on that, see how that works. I guess, the other thing, one thing David did mention to me, yes, like I said, he's optimistic that, oh yes, with a good year and ozone year in 2021, we may be able to make it, but 2021 hasn't happened yet. So the other thing hanging over our head would be a bump up to Sirius sometime in 2021.
Would it be
It'd be yeah, you're already serious, so it'd be
severe, sorry.
Okay. So Michael, what is the kind of your sense on if this exceptional event is highly likely, maybe possible, or a kind of a long shot?
I honestly don't have a sense. That's kind of being explored through our monitoring group and the folks down at OAQPS. So they'll look at the analysis that LATCO's contractor is doing. I was involved in just the presentation that they had last week, but I think it's just stay tuned right now.
Okay. So one track is the exceptional event gets accepted, the area gets redesignated to attainment, and the other track is it's very close to being bumped up again to severe. Are those the two scenarios that we're currently staring at?
Yeah, and I think the we had the redesignation in house, so that's something we would move forward on. If you had an additional bump up, that would be more rate of progress, probably lower budgets. Well, not lower budgets, period.
Okay. So as part of the request for redesignation to attainment, there was a budget included in that. That budget or the stuff related to that received adverse comments or received comments or whatever it was. So our budget wasn't approved. Is there any update on the status of where the motor vehicle emissions budget is?
Well, I mean, you had the rate of progress budgets were deemed adequate and approved as part of the moderate SIP requirements. We didn't approve the attainment demo and the other parts of that. So, I mean, we deemed it adequate. I think we'll be moving ahead, addressing those moderate SIP requirements, specifically on rate of progress. So that'll be coming soon. We held off because we thought we were going to redesignate.
Okay. So the budget that we're using for conformity, for this particular conformity that we just discussed, the agenda, is our previous budget. We have not switched to the new budget. For our next one, should we use the new budget or continue with the current one that we used and showed today?
I would do the current one.
Okay. And so, Buzz, you guys are okay with that then? I just want to make sure we're all on the same page.
Right. Yeah, that's what we've got going with. So.
Okay. So you guys have not changed any budget numbers either. You're using the same ones as before.
Right.
Okay. Just so we're all on the same page. Okay. So if the region were to get bumped up to severe, other than redoing the budget, is there any other impact that the CMAP folks would have to be aware of, or anything we need to do different as a region because of that? I'll ask Michael. Yeah.
No, I think it's just you would be involved in the process of developing the SIP.
Okay. All right. Any other discussion points on this? Okay, hearing none, we will continue on. The next one is the 2015 ozone NACS development. There's really two issues related to this. I mean, based on the monitor data, we're nowhere close to attaining, so I don't think that's even being entertained. However, there's still this issue about what the non-attainment area actually is with McHenry. Michael, do you have any update on McHenry?
So where we're at now, we're trying to address the remand from the court. Our plan at this point is to move forward for Illinois by adding McHenry back into the non-attainment area.
Okay.
Based off our consulting with IPA and basing that, supporting documentation, what we went out with at 120 days. So our proposal was to include McHenry County. We're going to be adding McHenry County back in. So the schedule is to try to get this done before the change in administration. Is that going to happen? It's hard to say, but that's sort of the schedule we're operating on.
Okay. And yeah, McHenry did not have a good year for ozone, so that would seem to be appropriate from the least the monitor data. Buzz, is that how you guys are looking at it too? McHenry's going to be back in the non-attainment area then? Is that how you guys are approaching these things?
Again, that's more been going on at David's level. He certainly warned me about McHenry County coming back in,
Okay.
at least for the moderate part for the standard. That wouldn't be a big deal. I've already done our inventory and reporting requirements, including McHenry County. So that's just if we have to go out to a public notice with a different inventory, it's the same numbers, just sliced differently.
Okay.
So that's theoretically all ready to go. I won't say I'll go slightly off topic, but for Michael Leslie, since he said looks like McHenry is more certainly in. This does not apply to Chicago, but Monroe County was also part of that lawsuit, which is part of the St. Louis non-attainment, or possibly is Monroe County possibly or more likely going in also.
Yeah.
Okay, that's just something for so I can maybe plan myself here. So okay, but also so I have those. We did submit our required SIP element for the moderate part of the moderate, which is just basically an inventory. It doesn't include any budgets or anything like that. What we submitted did not include McHenry County, because that's what it was at the time. But if we're required to do something to include McHenry County, we can probably turn that around fairly quickly. So that's what we have now and what we're waiting for. Like you said, the ozone is pretty bad, and David is not as optimistic on that, because otherwise, if we can find a way to come up with negative ozone in 2021, maybe we could get to the standard.
Negative ozone, that would be
So likely not. So that starts us eventually off on the same path as the 2008 standard, where we would get bumped up to serious. And we would go through the whole process again, rate of progress, budgets, all that stuff, just like we did when 2008 was bumped up. Again, no official notifications of that, but likely sometime in 2021.
okay. Wow. So it seems like we're going to be serious at some point. I mean, even though we technically are for 08, I don't think there's going to be any escaping the 2015 serious standard. Based on what I have a little tracking sheet of the monitor data, and it looks like a fourth highest over 75 happened on 9 monitors in our region this summer. So I think almost all of them, only 3 of them, Schiller Park, ComEd, and Braywood, did not violate have a fourth highest over 70. So, we're at about 80% of our monitors are violating the 2015 and about 70% the 2008 this summer. That doesn't look too promising for getting attainment for the 2015 standard, at least. Would that be fair to say, Michael?
Yeah, that's definitely fair to say.
Okay. So, all right. So we just keep going down the bump up train. Okay.
Yep. And the train speeds up, unfortunately.
The train speeds up. So, I mean, is there anything we can do CMAP wise to help with this stuff? I mean, I think that's really, other than just watching the numbers not look so good and to keep modeling it and showing that we are in attainment, but then the monitors, clearly go off. Are there things that you guys think that we could or should be doing to help with the situation? I'll go to Michael first, and then Buzz, if you could follow up with that.
Yep.
That's the $1 million question, I think, Russell. It's It's just how aggressive people get on controlling the mobile source sector. And that's sort of a regional discussion that the states and you guys and LATCO would have when you're developing SIP.
Okay, because as of now, we've never, I wouldn't say never, we've not for several years discussed transportation control measures. And that's not something that we probably want to go down that road. But I guess that it's always an option. Buzz, what do you guys think? Is there anything we can do to be helping you guys with the ozone?
Not off the top of my head. Yes, I mean, you could see budgets shrink, certainly. The other thing that may allay any of your needs or issues is that, yes, if we are or do come up with reductions in other areas besides mobile, on-road mobile, that would certainly, hopefully alleviate you needing to, I mean, without doing any of the numbers or seeing what these reductions are. If we can get reductions elsewhere, that keeps us from reducing on-road motor vehicles as much. And to what degree that has been looked at. I know of the fact that maybe some people are looking at from our end what other states have as regulations to see how they compare to ours, to what can be reduced and what we get from that. But that'll be interesting, because when I did the 2017 inventory, which is the last big inventory, there's no real industry type that really stands out from emissions of, that, oh, hey, here's something we haven't gotten to yet, or there's a good way to, get some reductions. Everything is all kind of the same now and mashed together. So there's no good outliers. So that'll be interesting.
Okay. Thank you, Buzz. Anybody else have anything they want to say on the 2015 standards? Okay, hearing none, we will continue on. Number 9, AMPO's transportation conformity paper. So as part of the AMPO air quality working group, they have a consultant, and we have provided the consultant with a variety of inputs to a transportation conformity paper that has gone out for kind of final review amongst the working group. And what I was told last week is that they hope to have the final version to be released either by the end of this year or very early next year. Once that is done, it's supposed to be kind of a toolkit or a guide box a little bit about for those folks who haven't done conformity before. It also addresses a lot of the issues related to doing conformity. In our region, and Michael, you could probably attest to this more than anybody, it's fairly straightforward. But in other regions, they have different attainment areas for different standards, and they got donut areas, and they have all kinds of jurisdictional challenges with working together with different folks. We're very fortunate not to have those issues. The paper does address some of those challenges that other MPOs and other areas happen to have. So I think that that'll be a good thing to put out there for practitioners and for the public at large. So when that's available, I'll send it out to the group, and might even post it to the webpage. The next thing on our agenda is actually going to be a presentation. My colleague Sarah is going to give it on our greenhouse gas emissions. I'm going to give a little bit of an intro here, and I'm going to turn it over to Sarah. So CMAP is looking at various things related to climate and climate mitigation as part of our On to 2050. One of those areas is on-road mobile source greenhouse gases. And what we're going to do today is try to show you what we're trying to call, or what we are calling, is the baseline. So we can't test mitigation efforts, and we can't test different scenarios unless we know where we are and where we're starting from. And so today's presentation is an attempt to show you where we're starting from in a variety of different ways to slice and dice the data. And with that, I'll give it to Sarah to take it away.
Thanks, Russell. Looks like I need to add some GoToMeeting permissions, so I might have to restart here unless you have a copy of the slides. that you can share with us.
I do have a copy of slides. You want me to put them up on the screen then?
Yeah, I think that might be a little smoother. Sorry
Okay.
about
Hang on a second. Let me share my screen real quick.
that. All right.
All right.
Thank you.
Sure.
Okay, so we can go ahead and start with the next slide. And okay, so we want to look at transportation emissions because of our role in shaping regional transportation and because of the impact of transportation on our regional emissions. So in the 2015 greenhouse gas inventory, transportation was the second largest emission sector, as you can see in the pie chart. On-road emissions make up the vast majority of transportation sector emissions, as seen in the bar chart callout, and are nearly 1/4 of all emissions. So this presentation, as Russell mentioned, will focus exclusively on-road transportation emissions on the regional scale. And region in this case refers to the Illinois portion of the Illinois, Indiana, Wisconsin non-attainment area. So next slide. So as you guys are quite familiar, we use MOVE's modeling system to generate the numbers that were in the greenhouse gas inventory and all of the numbers that you'll see in this presentation today. So again, the numbers in this presentation, we're using MOVE's 2014A. And so as we move to MOVE's 3, there will be additional fuel economy regulations included in the model for light and heavy duty vehicles. And of course, MOVES requires a variety of input files, and the MOVES inputs in green here come from our trip-based travel demand model. And that model has its own set of inputs, including socioeconomic data and regional highway and transit networks. So we update all of these inputs regularly to reflect new regional projects, shifts in demographics, and shifts in travel behavior. So we use MOVES for our semi-annual conformity analysis, as Russell presented earlier today. And as part of this analysis, we also gather information on greenhouse gases. So these slides will explore greenhouse gas emissions for previous conformity runs. And one thing to note is that this presentation will generally use metric tons or million metric tons, while the numbers in today's conformity memo use US tons. So as Russell is already showing us here, we're looking at regional greenhouse gas emissions from the spring 2020 conformity run in this slide. We can see that over time, modeled greenhouse gas emissions decreased through 2040 and then increased slightly for a total of 24.2 million metric tons CO2 equivalent in 2050. So this would be a 16% decrease from the 2015 greenhouse gas inventory value. So recall that this is essentially our baseline scenario. It's showing us what regional emissions will look like with our planned transportation improvements, current travel model assumptions, and the emissions regulations captured in MOVE's 2014. We're focusing on this baseline data to better understand it before using it as a starting point for modeling mitigation strategies. One thing to point out in this slide is the increase from 2040 to 2050. One factor in this increase is that virtually all of the fiscally constrained projects in our current long-range transportation plan on to 2050 have a completion year of 2040 or sooner. So very little capacity is added to the roadway network after 2040. VMT continues to increase from 2040 to 2050, however, so we are introducing more congestion into the system, and thus more idling, acceleration and deceleration events, and traveling at suboptimal speeds, which increases fuel consumption and thus greenhouse gas emissions. In addition, fuel efficiency improvements in MOVE's 2014 stay constant after 2025 for light duty vehicles and 2018 for heavy duty vehicles. All right, so moving on, that data was from the spring 2020 conformity run, but we can also look at how results vary across previous conformity runs. So in the data that we analyzed, it spanned from 2016 to 2020. And conformity runs in these years spanned across two comprehensive plan setups, go to 2040 and on to 2050. We typically don't see shifts at the regional level in the semi-annual conformity runs, since few projects have a large regional impact. But with a plan update comes updates to the socioeconomic forecast, travel model, and other MOVES inputs. So here we're looking at results grouped by plan. And in this graph, we see greenhouse gas emissions by year for conformity runs grouped by plan. Go to 2040 runs are in the blue, and on to 2050 are in the red. What we see here is that emissions results are actually mostly consistent between the plans, even though on to 2050 focused on infill development and transit ridership. Next slide. And we can see that difference in development and mode choice patterns between the plans here, where we're comparing the annual vehicle miles traveled, or VMT, for conformity runs grouped by plan. So we see that total VMT is indeed higher for Go to 2040 runs. Although it's higher, we saw that emissions results are mostly consistent between plans. So VMT is one factor driving greenhouse gas emissions, and we'll look at it in several slides during this presentation. But as this example illustrates, it's not the only explanatory variable. In on to 2050, there was a change that caused a small increase in CO2e per mile. One of them being an increase in the percentage of total VMT that came from trucks as opposed to passenger vehicles. So just mentioning the trucks versus the passenger vehicles underscores the importance of source type when we're analyzing emissions. So we can spend some more time considering how different source types contribute to total emissions. And first, we'll review the categories that we're talking about. So for this analysis, we split out the top 4 source types that contribute most to greenhouse gas emissions, and then grouped the other source types in the other category. So the top 4 were passenger car, passenger truck, combination long haul truck, and single unit long haul truck. And the descriptions are there. And let's go ahead and look at the results. So in the top chart, we're looking at percent of total on-road emissions for each year by source type from the spring conformity run. Recall that emissions are generally going down over the years, but this stacked bar chart allows us to see how the composition of those emissions by source type varies. And what we see is that over model years, the portion of total emissions from cars and trucks in the blue and red decreases, while the portion of emissions from combination and single unit long haul trucks in the orange and green increases. VMT information is in the bottom chart. The VMT split by source stays relatively consistent over time, so this represents an average year. As you can see, the majority of regional VMT comes from passenger cars and trucks. Combination long haul trucks in the orange have outsized emissions contributions for their VMT contributions, which reflects their different emissions profiles. And next slide, we can also look at how emissions are spread across different facility or road types. So in the next slide, this is similar to the last graph. We're showing percent total emissions by year at the top, but this time split out by road type. So no surprises here, the majority of emissions in our region occur on urban roads, which are in the dark and light blue. But one thing to point out, pulling in the VMT information on the bottom, is that though urban restricted roads, which are freeways and expressways in the light blue, have less contribution to total VMT than urban unrestricted, which are the arterials and local streets in the dark blue, they actually make up a slightly greater percentage of total emissions, likely pointing to the fact that most truck travel occurs on these roads. And next slide. So far we've been looking at annual totals, but we can also look at monthly, daily, and hourly emissions. The travel model, which is of course one of the inputs into the MOVES model, produces results for an average weekday. So to get these other timescales, we use vehicle count data from IDOT to scale the data appropriately. And as we break down the regional data into finer pieces, the uncertainty around each data point does grow. So here, starting with month, we're looking at 2050 emissions by month by source type for the June 2020 conformity run. Here, combination long haul truck emissions in orange peak in August through November, which is also the time of the year with the most long haul truck VMT. Passenger car emissions in the light blue peak in May through July, which is also the time of year with the most passenger car VMT. Aside from changes in activity, a factor in monthly emission changes is weather. So depending on the pollutant, there can be an increase in emissions at low temperature associated with cold starts and or high temperature associated with AC usage. So moving on to day type, First, comparing total emissions for weekday versus weekend. Note that weekend emissions are 38.5% lower than weekday emissions. So then looking at the chart on the right, percent total emissions for a 2050 July day by source type for each day type, we can see that trucks in the green and orange make up a reduced portion of daily emissions on the weekend. Trucks also have a greater reduction in weekend VMT than passenger vehicles. So truck weekend VMT is down 62% compared to weekday, while passenger vehicle VMT is down only 26% on the weekends. And finally, looking at the hourly time scale, here we're looking at emissions by source by hour for a July weekday in 2050. We can see that passenger vehicle emissions in the red and light blue peak during the AM and PM peak travel periods, which are shaded in light gray. Combination long-haul trucks in the orange keep emission production high between the peak travel periods and have higher emissions output than any other source during the overnight periods. All right, and as you also know, MOVES can support analysis for a number of pollutants. So we can gather background data and conduct similar analysis on any of these. So we can move forward 2 slides. So here's one way to look at the data for these other pollutants. So here we're looking at percent total emissions for various pollutants by source type for a 2050 July weekday. Passenger vehicles and long-haul trucks have been grouped together respectively for a simpler view. So we have long-haul trucks in the orange and passenger vehicles in the light blue. The takeaway here is that each pollutant has a different emission source composition. Trucks are major sources of methane, oxides of nitrogen, and exhaust particulate matter 2.5, while passenger vehicles are the top sources of brake and tire particulate matter 2.5, volatile organic compounds, and nitrous oxide. CO2e, which is what we've been looking at this entire presentation, of course, is shown for reference, and a few individual greenhouse gases that are part of CO2e are labeled with the greenhouse gas tag. And so, again, to underscore here, we need to tackle multiple sources if we want to tackle multiple pollutants. So next slide. So that is pretty much our characterization of current emissions projections. But how does that compare with where we want to be? So here we see the same data you saw in the very first slide, total on-road emissions from the last conformity run, or rather the spring conformity run in red. And now we've added the draft on-road emissions target in blue. And Russell explained to us earlier how this draft target was calculated. So it's not our official target, but it's a starting point for how the transportation sector should contribute to achieving our overall regional target. And the regional target is 25.7 million metric tons CO2e or less from all sectors combined in 2050. As you can see, the gap between our model data and the target grows over time, so we need additional actions and changes to reach the target. Well, next slide. So we hope that this baseline data analysis can help us understand and develop what actions would be the best for achieving our target. So some of our next steps are that we want to refine the target itself, so make an actual official adopted target for this sector. We want to model mitigation strategies using this baseline under the Transportation Mitigation Strategies project. We also, of course, want to work on transitioning to MOVES 3, and if possible, looking at emissions on different geographic scales. And that's it for this analysis, and we'd love to hear your questions, comments, or thoughts, if you'd like to see any slides again, and anything else you have.
So we'd like to have some questions if there are any, or comments, or stuff that you guys thought was interesting, not interesting, are we on the right track, that kind of stuff. Nobody? Yeah.
Well, I'll chime in here. Sarah, is this the results, just digging into the results from the MOVES model runs that we have? Or did you have some other way to get at all of these facts and figures?
No, that was exactly it. Russell basically put together all of the outputs from, again, runs from like 2016 to 2020 into a spreadsheet for me, and then took it from there.
Yeah, I don't know if Buzz, if you guys ever produce CO stuff even internally when you guys do moves, but we've always had CO be one of the outputs. We just haven't been including it in our results. So we had the information kind of available to crunch it.
Right. No, we haven't usually been doing that. It's enough work for us, like we said, to just get the regular criteria pollutants out and deal with all that data.
We do help a lot of Matt Harrell from Illinois EPA, and I help a lot of states with their rail inventories, getting high resolution greenhouse gas inventories for rail. So if you guys ever get to that point, we can gladly help you. If we can help tribes in Oklahoma, we can help you guys.
Okay.
So I'll just say from EPA's perspective, I was just going to say that we haven't really been focusing on greenhouse gases, but it seems the new administration will be taking a different tact on greenhouse gases. So.
And I guess my only comment was just general, kind of open to the group. I mean, I don't know how else to say, but how comfortable are we with the move's results? I mean, how strongly do you guys feel about this? I mean, what does it mean? I mean, is it defensible? Where do we go with that?
It would surely be interesting to know how regional fuel sales compare to, the moves, fuel estimates, or greenhouse gas estimates. Are they approximately in the same ballpark, or are they off by a lot?
And I guess I'll say what I always say when a question like that comes up, which is, what is the alternative to using the moves model?
Yeah, I will say, in my perspective, I think it's the most robust. It's the most analytical, and it has a lot of stuff baked into it that is very conducive to doing this kind of analysis. Moves 3 should be even better at doing this. It's got more, I think it's got the heavy duty GHG standards baked into it. And as Claire said, in absence some other way to do it, it's probably the best thing out there. The other problem we have with specific to GHG is there's really no way to calibrate it with real world stuff. PM and ozone, there's monitors out there. You can kind of say the monitor data is one way to look at it, and it moves as a modeling exercise. But we don't have that monitor data equivalent for greenhouse gas. So absent that, I'm not sure what is a better approach. I do think this is a fairly solid analytical approach because it incorporates our land use model and our transportation demand model into that. And as those things change, we can see the results of those on these pollutants. But I think we're open to other ideas if there are better ways to do it. As John said, is this the best way? I don't know. It's certainly a way we know how to do, though. I don't know, Michael, is anybody out there doing, I'm not aware of anybody really doing a lot of GHG outside of California, and they use a different model.
Yeah, I don't think anybody in the region is, taking a big steps towards those sort of analyses.
And the other thing we can do with moves is we can do what we hope to do, some pretty serious mitigation strategy modeling. So, what, for example, if we were going to have some percentage of the fleet, the cars in particular, become electric, well, what percentage of that would we need to be able to do to move the needle? Do we need, what percentage of freight, for instance, needs to be either alternative fuels or electric to move the needle? So we can do that kind of stuff with moves in a somewhat robust way. So I think that's our hope. But if there's other ways to do that, I think that we'd like to have those discussions too. Hearing none. Let me see. Are you still Mark? Are you still? Do you have any comments on this, Mr. Jansen?
No, I mean, yeah, we don't do a ton of greenhouse gas stuff, so I think that's. I don't know what we have to add, except that, like I said, we build good rail inventories that have fuel numbers that we can.
But you haven't heard of anybody else out there doing.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with the general concept, and I don't know what else you use. That unless you want big national answers that you count all the fuel being sold, kind of things, which doesn't help much in this situation.
Okay. All right. Anything else on this presentation? Otherwise, I think the next time we do a presentation like this, it might be to show some mitigation strategies and how they change from what you saw as baseline data. It may be quite a while. It might be 6 months or a year until you see those results, because we still have to figure out the mitigation strategies. So what I would like to know is, does this group have an interest in hearing about the mitigation strategies that we're considering, or learning a little bit more about what those strategies might be once we've kind of gone through our internal process? Is that something that this group might be interested in hearing more about?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I think that would be good for this group.
Okay. Tony, Mark, you guys have anything about this? Because some of these are probably going to involve some transit stuff, I would imagine. Maybe.
I don't have any comments.
Okay.
I mean, we love to hear what you guys are thinking. I know transit's in an interesting place right now, and I think strategies that may have been effective a year ago are everything's kind of being reanalyzed and relooked at across the country, depending on how things strategies are going to be dependent on how the industry bounces back, or where it goes from here, really. So, yeah, curious to see what you guys come up with. And it's something that we're listening to. And I know that, as Michael said, the next administration, similar to the previous, considered greenhouse gas, and it was something that was coming more on the radar. So I think that's something that's important. It's going to be looked at not just for you guys, but other MPOs in other regions.
Yeah, at one time it was being considered for a performance measure for CMAQ. We'll see if that materializes again. It never got finalized. So I think that there's potential that we might analyze projects and show its impact on greenhouse gas, not from I don't want to get too far in front of it, but not from a selection process, but from an informational process. I know we do that for CMAQ on some level now, but maybe we would expand that to other fund sources. That's the kind of things we're discussing. No decisions have been made yet.
And I'll just mention, I believe it, if I remember correctly, that greenhouse gas performance target that you mentioned, Russell, I believe that went through formal rulemaking to kind of extract that out of MAP 21 in the FAST Act. So to put that back in place, I would anticipate you'd have to go through rulemaking again, which again isn't a short process, especially when there's going to be a lot of things going on, I think, at the start of the new administration. So, and again, if we get a transportation bill in the next year, there may be aspects of that in there as well. So just wanted to mention it's not something that you can just flip the switch come January 20th and the requirements back in place.
So the good thing, though, the flip side is that there was something that went through formal rulemaking. So while there's not a formal rule per se, we do have kind of the framework of what that could look like, and we have something we could say, we could look at that and use that, because at least it's been vetted on some level. I mean, the region itself is at least CMAP is likely going to try to set some sort of greenhouse gas targets. We're under no obligation to do it, nor are we restricted to say that we can't do it. So I think it's something we're going to look at in doing it by at least different sectors, with on-road mobile source likely being one of those. So, we're not restricted from doing it. So I think that we're going to go ahead and at least give it a try and look at it. And perhaps as we get further along, we'll keep bringing stuff back to this committee so you guys are in the loop. So that's what we have for that. Are there any other questions on the greenhouse gases and where we're at today? Seeing none. Okay. Is there any other business that anybody would like to bring up at this time? Okay, again, I don't see any. Public comment. This is a chance for anybody who would like to make a comment on consultation, our process, and things of that nature. Okay, hearing none. The next meeting typically is always on call. I anticipate it to probably be in mid-May. We'll be starting our next conformity analysis and conformity amendment in the beginning of March. So that would probably be right after the public comment period is over. And if there were public comments, it would give us an opportunity to respond or address them. So I would anticipate mid-May or end of May would be the next time the Tier 2 committee meets. With that, I'll entertain adjournment. I guess we don't need a motion. We just kind of adjourn. So I thank everybody for being on the call. I hope everybody has a good holiday, and we will likely see you in, as my kids who are in school like to say, we'll see you next year. So thanks for everybody for coming.
Thanks, Russell.
Thanks, Russell.
Thanks, Russell.